My name is Marina Psaros. I'm Unity's sustainability lead, and I'm really excited to welcome you to this panel where we'll be talking with some of the Unity for Humanity grant winners. My co-host for this panel is Elizabeth Bagley from Project Rodham.
Hey everybody, it is so great to have you here at this panel today. And thanks, Marina. I'm just thrilled to introduce all of you to the creators that you get a chance to hear from today. As Marina said, I'm Elizabeth. I have been in the climate change and education space for a long time. And what really gets me excited about games and climate change is the impact that we can have, right? We know about the reach of games. We know about how games can bring people together to solve problems in really innovative and creative ways. And y'all, these creators today are right there in that space, making that change, working towards impact. So what we're going to talk about today, we're going to talk about how these really different approaches to experiences, all using the Unity platform, are having impact on our planet, in our communities, making the world a much better place for both people and the planet. So without further ado, enough from me. I am so excited to introduce you to Kat. Kat, come on in, tell us about you and what you're working on.
Hey, thank you. It's such a pleasure to be on this panel. My name is Kat Ross. I am a creative researcher and a performing artist working in new media. My project is something that I'm creating with Love Death Design, which is a studio that I co-created with Marina, who is an interactive designer and activist based in LA. We started it during the pandemic as a way to remotely connect, to develop immersive experiences to highlight environmental and social injustices. We're a really small team. There are just 4 of us right now. There's myself based in Portland, Oregon, Marina, who's in LA. We're working with a very talented 3D filmmaker named Marianne Talavera, who is based in New York City. And we also are working with a climate scientist and engineer named Nick Wilson, who's in LA. Our project is called District 64, and it's a VR storytelling project that is taking urgent action against localized hydrocarbon pollution and its community health impacts. Our pilot project is in District 64, which is in the California State Assembly, otherwise known as South Los Angeles. And that community is largely low income, and 90% of the residents are Black and Latinx. And what they're facing are health risks, generational health impacts, social health impacts, poor water quality, and environmental degradation. There are over 5,000 gas and oil wells in this part of LA. It's the largest collection in the state. And so what we're trying to do is use this new medium to bring awareness in a virtual space of protest alongside these folks who are most affected by environmental injustice.
Oh my gosh, Kat, thank you so much for all of the great work that you and your team are doing with District 64. And we can't wait for everybody to be able to experience the just the innovation and the important understandings and impact that you're having with that project. Next up, Mayrod, tell us about what you're working on.
Hi there, my name is Mayrod Nouri, and I am the founder of Anything Everything, which is an immersive content studio that merges technology and design to create new formats for storytelling. And the reason I'm here today is because I'm one of the executive producers of Powers of X, which is a project I'm doing with a few other great talented people and companies like Sun and Air and Nova Lab and XR-EDU. And it's a project that we're very honored as a recipient of the Unity for Humanity grant. And Powers of X is an immersive experience designed to raise awareness around the climate crisis, particularly for young people. And more specifically, it uses VR and AR to visualize the invisible impact that we each have on the planet with our everyday activities and things we make and do every day. And it goes a step further to hopefully present ways to make that impact more positive in a way that we think will be really special in VR and AR.
Oh, Mayrod, thanks so much. And when y'all are have a chance to play Powers of X, that feeling of, getting really, really, really small and understanding the interconnections at that scale, and then expanding out and understanding the layers upon layers of interconnections and how we fit into that space. It is so empowering and so impactful. So thank you to you and your team, Mayrod, for all the great work that you're doing. And Emilia, hi, it's great to see you. We'd love to hear more about what you're working on.
Well, hello everyone. Thank you very much. What a joy to be part of this panel, and thanks Unity for Humanity for collaborating with us to make this project a reality. Well, my name is Emilia. I'm the director of Origen, a narrative VR experience that connects the Amazon jungle, the Andes Mountains, and the Argentinian desert through the bond that some original communities maintain with their land. The chapter 1 of this adventure will be a dreamlike journey inside the heart of the Amazon jungle. And as the users navigate this VR environment, they come to know a series of stories which evoke the ancestral way of understanding the relationship between human life and nature, meaning that we are one with the land we inhabit and we are not separate from everything else.
Emilia, when I saw the artwork for Origen, I was just blown away. The beauty and the depth and just the connection you can feel with the indigenous stewards of the land, as well as with this deep story is so powerful. So thank you so much to you and your team for bringing that to life. I am so excited for more people to get to experience it. So Marina, what are you thinking about impact?
I'm wondering, these are such different stories coming from different places. And one of the things that we've talked a little bit about in some of our previous conversations is representation. In a different way, each of these stories is really looking at increasing the impact of these stories by bringing representation from voices that aren't normally heard or that haven't been heard a lot. And I wanted to dig into that a little bit because we've had such rich conversations before about it, because it's such an important part of the Unity for Humanity grant program. Kat, I'd love to hear what you're thinking about representation.
Yeah, I mean, coming from a studio of underrepresented artists and designers and being a woman creating a new media, I feel like our most profound real world impact is in the roles that we choose within technological evolution. Technology is not unbiased. I think that representation is super critical in these spaces in order to create an equitable culture. You know, in this burgeoning new medium, I think that we're setting the standard for how these spaces function. I think we need to demand our right as authors to tell our own stories and understand that folks deserve to tell their own stories. I think we also need to demand our right as an audience to have access to a diversity of perspectives. Within the context of the project that we're working on, District 64, we're super focused on community engagement and on co-authoring this project with those who are actually living the reality. You know, we don't all breathe the same air, we don't all drink the same water. And I think that we need these realities to be shared widely in order to promote visibility, but also, I mean, ideally, like generate outrage and action against these injustices. And I think, you know, like Los Angeles is considered to be a microcosm of the world because of its generous, you know, cultural donations and diversity of cultures. But I think this is also true because what's happening in South LA as far as environmental racism, that injustice is really representative of injustices faced all over the world. So I think having a diversity in these new mediums is just super critical to telling accurate stories.
I agree with Kat. We have to defend these rights about diversity and inclusion, and especially now when it's so necessary to rethink and reinvent our way of being in the world. And this is true both from the point of view of the audience and the storytellers themselves, because despite of their background, entire communities of artists can benefit from novel technologies because of the opportunity that provides to shape stories in a very unique way. In the case of Origen, for example, when the narrative is so intertwined with the environment, it made a lot of sense to me to generate an adventure in the first person. So therefore, using VR seemed ideal, and using its ability to generate powerful memories as well as to shape a narrative in which the user can make decisions or experiencing moments of serendipity connecting with the stories that inhabited territories for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. And this case has just been my personal experience, but going back to inclusivity and diversity, if we really want to extend this opportunity to wider communities of creators, we also need to think about ways of give access or democratize the production and distribution process much more.
I love that so much, Emilia, and especially when we think about how do we meet players where they're at with their lived experiences in the way that they're taking in information so that they can then act with that information in their communities, right? And I appreciate, both of you grounding your work in real communities with real people. And, part of your experience of bringing those stories to more people was thinking about how you wanted to tell those stories. And I know, Emilia, you talked about choosing VR. Mehrad, I want to hear a little bit more about why you chose your approach. Why not just do a side scroller? Why did you decide to do what you're doing?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it just seemed like the best medium possible for us, both VR and AR, because our project is really all about quantifying and qualifying the real world impact that we have on the planet. And in order to do that, we have to present the information in a tangible way that people can really understand and make sense of. So we chose VR and AR because of the amazing ability they have to convey scale in a way that no other medium can. So for example, it turns out it takes a lot of water to produce a cheeseburger. Around 2,500 liters, I think, is the estimate. From the grass to feed the cows, to all the ingredients, all of it together, 2,500 liters of water. And I'm sure a lot of people in the audience today might already know that, but a lot of people don't. And more importantly, none of us ever get to see that water when we take a bite. It's this environmental cost that we pay, but it's completely invisible to us when we actually take the action that required it. So even though it's a real cost, we don't see it. And even if I were to tell you that it takes 2,500 liters of water, I have no idea how much water that really is. And I certainly don't know what it looks like, right? But with VR and AR, I can show you exactly what it looks like, right? We can show you the burger itself at regular scale, and then right next to it, put a tank at full scale of 2,500 liters of water. And now all of a sudden, not only do I see it, but I get a very tangible, intuitive way of understanding like, oh, wow, okay, this crazy discrepancy between what I'm taking in and what it took. It's something you just can't convey in any other medium. And that's why we think it's perfect for what we're trying to achieve with Powers, and that we're trying to visualize that invisible impact in a really, really simple, intuitive way.
Fascinating. I think your V 2.0 has got to be with haptics, right? Have people be able to try and lift up the cow and the water. That'd be amazing.
Absolutely.
So you talked a little bit about some of your impact goals, and I want to drill down on those. I'd love to hear from all of you, really, as you're starting out, you're all, kind of in the early part or midway in your journey. Where are you thinking about what kind of real world impact you want to have, what kind of goals you might be setting, and how you might be putting those ideas into your project plans?
So our impact goals with Powers of X are to basically get into as many hands as possible, particularly young people like high school students and junior high. We just want to distribute it as far and wide as possible. And our approach to the project is not just to throw out a bunch of statistics and figures about these macro climate challenges that we're facing that, frankly, it would be really, really hard for anyone to do much about on their own, let alone a teenager, right? So our focus is really on everyday activities and choices that we and they do have some control over, what they eat, what they wear, how much energy they use. All these things are kind of micro choices that they take every day, and they do have an impact, right? So what we want to do is to shine a light on all of those choices and all those activities to show them what the negative effects are. And again, very tangible ways, but not only just to kind of scream at them about like how costly daily life can be for the environment, but also then to turn it around and flip it and present them with some solutions and alternatives that show them how they can actually affect positive change. You know, like what are some alternative things you can eat, alternative types of clothes you can buy, or maybe don't buy so many clothes, or at least know what the cost is when you're doing these things. And we think that is where, if we can actually inspire people to pay more attention and to make a few different changes and adjust their daily lives, it actually can aggregate to mean something a little bit more meaningful and lasting in terms of our impact.
I like that idea of micro choices at scale. That's a really interesting way of thinking about it. And then the distribution. Kat, how about you? What are you thinking of for your social or for your impact goals?
Yeah, I mean, one of our main goals, I think, is to generate a collective and creative demand for social and environmental justice by trying to inspire sustainable future architectures. I think, you know, like how do we do that? We're prioritizing community engagement and like really getting to the source of where these issues are happening as micro as we can. We're distributing DIY testing kits for water and air quality to folks in South LA so that they can understand the environmental conditions where they live. We're also going to be hosting some workshops on 3D world building and asset creation and VR storytelling for those community members who are interested. We're going to be donating some equipment and hardware to a local high school in Watts neighborhood in South LA. So we're really trying to create a scaffolding even in order to provide these tools and give like a push so that folks can start creating in this new medium, because it is, like Amelia was saying, it is so powerful. And I think Merad said this as well. It's when you're in VR, there's something so visceral and so otherworldly. It's just very impactful. So it's important to be, of course, like bringing these really critical issues into this medium. I think also I'd like to mention just really quickly the importance of data. We're thinking about having community members collecting and analyzing their own data. I think data is power. Data is something that you can take to protest. You can take it to the political process. I think empowering folks to be more in the know. And Mayrad had mentioned this also. It's like I like to call it the separation from the know-how of works. We're so estranged from systems of production. And in our project, that would be like the production of hydrocarbon and its impact on community health. We get so distanced from the actual impact that we have, or that these processes have. And I think that our main goal is to not let that gap get any wider and to kind of bring it back in to the ground. And hopefully for this to be iterative, we would love to take this to places all over the world and let people tell their own stories.
It's amazing. I'm thinking about what you're saying as the sort of democratization of narrative, and there's a lot of work in citizen science communities looking at how do we bring additional people into data collection, data dissemination, and also interpretation of that information, right? Like who owns the narrative, who owns the knowledge generation and transfer is something that you're all working on in really different ways. And it's exciting to see how XR, so how AR and VR can actually augment people's power in these new ways. And Amelia, I'd love to hear a little bit about what your impact goals are.
Well, our goal is to reach an audience which is as large and as varied as possible. Therefore, we are thinking about creative ways to attract wide audiences that don't use VR yet. We are doing this by involving other media and formats. For example, we are developing an AR sound experience that can embrace the VR one. We also plan to create a book installations that we hope that will attract new audiences to this VR piece. Reaching a diverse audience is so related with the impact goal for us, because we believe in the power of storytelling, and especially when it comes to telling the stories about the cultures that are not the dominant ones. And in the case of Origen, the stories of communities that have a much more mature way of understanding our place in nature and who are actively defending key territories against multiple interests.
I'm so heartened to hear that you all are centering your work around impact and that you have really specific and really big audacious goals about how you want to impact the world with your experiences. So first of all, thank you so much. I do want to put a plug in for y'all though, that everybody should go to the Unity for Humanity site and check out your content. So let's make sure that people know that this is real incredible work happening in the world. Please don't miss out. Please be part of this incredible work. So with that, I want to dive a little more into impact. And impact can be really kind of a thorny space because it can be really hard to measure things. We talked a bit about the power and importance of data. We also talked about how sometimes numbers and just throwing out 20,000 liters of water, right, doesn't compute with folks, right? And doesn't actually lead to action. So I'm going to give you all a couple choices of direction here. I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you're thinking of measuring impact, right? That's a big question. And if you're not quite there yet, I'd love to even take a step back to think about what are some of the obstacles you're facing when you start to think about coming up with an impact measurement plan, right? So I'm happy to hear, anything either about an obstacle that you're working through right now, or what you're kind of thinking when it comes to that next step on measuring impact. So I'm going to toss it back to Emilia. If you want to talk about an obstacle or your impact plan moving forward and how you want to measure it.
Well, actually, it's kind of the same point I was making before. Like, I think providing access to this story because of the technology is hard sometimes in specific territories that don't have the access to this technology. So we are thinking in various creative ways to provide access to the VR headsets or try to engage a large audience with the piece. And about measuring, well, I actually really don't know. We just, honestly, we are trying to impact this as in the biggest way as we can, like talking with museums, seeing ways of distributing the content, but we are not measuring this impact yet.
Thanks, Emilia, and thanks for being so honest. I mean, I think for some of us, it can be hard to wrap our minds around. One big obstacle is hardware, right? And making sure that people have access to get the software that these incredible creators are creating, right? We need to make sure that people have access to the hardware. Another aspect that Emilia brings up that's so important is that what data matter and to whom and through what ways are we going to gather it to actually have an impact. So thanks so much for thinking about that so well. Mayrod, how about you? What are you thinking about either in terms of obstacles or in terms of how you're hoping to measure impact?
Yeah, it's honestly, it's kind of the same thing, right? Technology and hardware is a big problem. Especially when, for us, we're focusing on students in particular. And obviously every school in the country doesn't have the exact same access to the same equipment or connectivity. So bridging that digital divide is definitely a challenge. With Powers, we originally conceived it as a VR experience because VR can be just dramatically more immersive, right? You have more control over what the viewer is seeing, and it can create, in some ways, a more immersive, more impactful experience. There aren't that many headsets in the world, period, let alone in classrooms, right? So because of that, we did a bit of a pivot to actually go AR first. So we're focusing more of our efforts on taking the same format and general concepts of Powers of X, but coming up with a solution that runs on mobile devices that are more readily available in classrooms. So everything from tablets and smartphones from, I think, going as far back as iPhone 6S is our minimum spec, which is a while, right? And that's not the easiest thing to do either, because these devices advance so much in processing power every year that creating that minimum viable product for all across all these different devices is a challenge, but very, very much a worthy one, right? Because we just want to make sure that as many kids as possible get a chance to view this. And as far as measuring, again, it's really, really tough, obviously, because it's one thing to expose the viewer to the project. It's another thing to see what action is actually taken. But our primary goal in terms of measurement is really just, again, get into as many hands as possible. And hopefully with our project, our goal is not to be preachy and tell you what to do or tell you you're a bad person for having a cheeseburger. Our goal is just to make you aware of what the cost is of those choices. And then it's really up to you. So that's what our I guess our key metric would be, is to expose as many people as possible to those facts and then let them decide.
Thanks, Mayron. Kat, I'd love to hear from you about what you're thinking in terms of obstacles that you're facing, or how you're hoping to measure impact.
Yeah, I mean, obstacles always funding as a small studio, and especially not being in the entertainment sector, being more on the activist side or nonprofit side, funding is always huge. That's why this opportunity is so amazing, and to be able to realize this project with the support from Unity for Humanity. I wanted to touch really quickly on the hardware thing and the measuring impact. I feel like we have this desire to quantify always, right? Like, how many headsets are in what rooms. And the way that we're trying to kind of approach it, hardware is, like, I totally acknowledge that it's a huge issue. Access is a huge issue. And there are some small ways that we can get around it, right? Like Mayrod is starting an AR. What we're developing, we're going to make web-based to try to narrow that access gap. But also, I've been really loving this idea. My co-founder Marina and I talk often about this, but it's like, if we could move away from specialization, like not every single person is going to be someone who creates in VR or enjoys VR. But if we look at it as like this totally new landscape that we're approaching, it's so new, right? So there's so many different areas to access it or to create in it. So thinking about collaboration, having folks who are gathering data or on the science side, or contributing a sound design, or to sort of like be able to measure impact by engagement, and how we can bring communities together, or how we can just get the presence of these stories out there. I think that's how I would measure it, I guess.
I think that's a great segue actually to another of the panels that we have at this conference, which is around, it's called What's Next in Conservation Storytelling for all of you watching. And it's moderated by Kat Cizik, and it's a bunch of different creators who've been doing work in this space for a while, who've been putting their creations in at museums and in the classroom. And they're in a really different stage of the project where they're now looking kind of retrospectively, what have we been able to achieve? What has COVID changed about where we're going to move going forward? And really looking also at some of these areas of access, impact measurement, looking at differences between short and long-term distribution of materials and also hardware. So I'd like to encourage everyone to take a look at that session. I'd also like to say thank you so much. Congratulations to each of you. Thank you very much, Elizabeth, for co-hosting. Thanks everyone for being here.
Hooray! Way to go, everybody.